Today on More to the Story, we're going to talk about your brain and some interesting new discoveries concerning that big thought machine that's housed inside of your cranium. Right after this.
More to the Story, a show that explores what's happening in the world from a Christian perspective. Subscribe on the platform where you're enjoying the show, or go to freegrace.in to subscribe for email notifications of our releases. More to the Story with Lucas Kitchen.
Today, we're going to explore some interesting topics related to the brain. Are you interested in brain science? Now, I don't know how this happened, but for whatever reason, the algorithm that handles my news feed has figured out that I like brain science. Now, a lot of it I read and I don't really even know what they're talking about, but there's something about the complexity and the beauty of the human brain that I'm very interested in. And so that's what we're going to talk about. It's something I have a fascination with. So let's take a look at the brain. In our first segment, we're going to look at virtual reality dementia. One of the big issues in neuroscience is dementia, of course. Lots of resources go into trying to solve this problem. And many people are trying to figure out how to fight dementia. So millions of people suffer from dementia in its various forms, and there are lots of pharmaceutical therapies that have been tried for reducing or even attempting to reverse the damage of dementia. But a new technology is pursuing a non-pharmaceutical approach. It would be great if there was an approach for therapy that didn't involve medication. So now here's where the surprising turn steps in. I don't know, does a turn step in? Whatever, it's a surprising turn. It's VR, or virtual reality. Have you tried out any of the commercially available virtual reality headsets yet? I have. I've tried a few of them, but I actually owned for a while Meta Quest 2, I think was the model. And I had some fun with it. It seemed like it was really targeted at gamers, and I'm not really much of a gamer. It was a really neat gimmick, and it was very immersive. But I felt kind of like the technology still needed to advance a bit or to develop some before it could be like a daily use tool that I would use for work, like say writing or, kind of as a virtual display. But I did enjoy it. It was very impressive. Now, most people think of VR as simply a gaming platform, but a number of neurological researchers recently authored a study in which they explored the use of virtual reality as a therapy for dementia and Alzheimer's. And their results were actually pretty encouraging and very interesting. So VR has been shown in these studies to help those with Alzheimer's recall old memories. I mean, that is one of the chief difficulties with dementia and Alzheimer's is memory problems, of course. And so virtual reality, this is the gold standard of therapy, and there is some uptick in the outcome for those with dementia that are put on therapy with VR. It's also been shown in some cases to reduce aggression. There's aggression that comes along with dementia probably because of frustration, difficulties in various communication schemas and things like that. And so virtual reality has been able to reduce some of that aggression, and also an interesting one, to improve the patient's ability to interact and their relationship with caregivers. So not only is VR a viable option for some therapies, but it can play a role in diagnosing dementia as well. Now, this is a big surprise for me. I mean, I never thought of the idea of applying virtual reality to dementia, but I kind of suspect that in the next number of years, we're going to see virtual reality applied to a lot of fields that no one had ever thought to apply them to before. So in addition to all this, There are other groups who are using VR to help family members and loved ones get an understanding of some of the difficulties faced by those with dementia. So they do this by simulating. There's some simulations on some VR platforms where it simulates what it's like to have dementia. And this has actually helped some of the loved ones of those with dementia to have some empathy and to understand a little bit of what their loved one is going through. So it's amazing. I mean, it's just amazing to see how these platforms that we think of as toys for entertainment, how they can be adapted for very important purposes. So as an occasional sci-fi writer, I'm wondering if there will ever be a point where technology will be able to read a person's mind. That's right, read a person's mind. Well, you've heard of MRI, but have you heard of fMRI? It was developed in the 90s, so it's not exactly brand new, but it has been used in a lot of neurological studies. So the F before the MRI stands for functional. So that's functional magnetic resonance imaging. So it's a type of MRI that has been used since the 90s to study the brain in real time. That's right, they can actually make images of the brain as it's operating, as it's thinking, as it's going through various thought experiments. And this gives all kinds of data that helps us understand what's going on in the brain. Now, an interesting use, I would say, is picking the brain, just almost quite literally, not quite literally, very virtually though. It wasn't until recently that scientists were able to pick the brain, so to speak, with fMRI. They've been able to identify certain thoughts based on what portions of the brain lit up in the fMRI scans. And so each category of thought had a type of brain image signature. And that's an interesting way to think of your brain. When you think of something, there is a signature happening, and that's in electrical signals. But there is an electrical signature happening in your brain when you think of any given thought. And so neuroscience teams have been able to identify what a subject, that they're researching, what a subject was dreaming about, objects like a horse or a clock or a husband. A different group that was researching this was able to differentiate between when a subject was thinking of a skyscraper as opposed to a strawberry. And so quite literally, they are able to read the mind in a very rudimentary way. Now, the way that this basically works is they have a test or a control experiment and they have their subjects think of certain things, and then they take images of the brain, and then they use those images to match them to future incidents of that thought. But what's interesting is that those images don't just work for that one individual person, like say a thumbprint would. They actually can work across multiple different people, because there's an average to how the brains of everybody works. And so in 2013, there was probably one of the bigger breakthroughs. It was a Carnegie Mellon University team that developed a process by which they could actually map a person's emotional state. So they could, with this information, they could tell what kind of emotions a person was experiencing. So they could tell how someone was feeling by looking at their brain. They were using fMRI to essentially read their mind, so to speak. Now, one thing that this study revealed is that specifically lust had a distinct neurological signature that was different from all other emotions. Now, as a person that studies the Bible, I guess this doesn't surprise me a whole lot, but it seemed to surprise the researchers, because I think they just thought of lust as one of many emotions, but they discovered that it has a really different signature, mental, brain signature, that's different from all other emotions. And so out of every possible emotion, what's interesting is the computer was most able to identify lust for its difference from the other. So lots of interesting information there, and it'll be interesting to see so that was 2013. It's been a few years. Be interesting to see what the next breakthroughs in this type of technology are. I saw a unit not long ago that you could actually wear. It was just sort of a consumer product you could wear. You could train it, and then you could do various tasks on your computer by it reading recognized brain signals. So we're advancing so quickly in this. It'll be really interesting to see what happens in the next few years. Complex design. So it's often been said that of all of God's many complex creations, the human brain is the most complex. Now, when I first heard that, I thought, I don't know. But as researchers have dug into the brain, sometimes literally, but usually figuratively, they've found it is incredibly complex. And it's as if every time we think we understand something, there is another layer of complexity down below that layer of complexity. So a group of scientists from Trinity College, Dublin, who have nothing in particular to say about God's creation of the brain, have strengthened the point nonetheless. They believe that they have discovered quantum computation within the functioning of the brain. Quantum computation. I don't know if you've heard of the new goal in computer science, which is quantum computing. Well, they believe that the brain actually functions on some type of quantum computation. So I read a couple of the studies and some of the articles about it and tried to get a fix on what exactly it means. And honestly, I had no idea. I mean, there was so much quantum technical jargon in the articles. I didn't really know what they were talking about, but they did talk about particles being entangled and quantum states and measuring the fluid within the cranium. And I don't know, but their conclusion is that they believe that the brain operates in some type of quantum realm in the same way that a quantum computer would if they could ever invent and run one of those. Now, they did mention that this could explain why the human brain can still outperform some supercomputers on various tasks. There are things that supercomputers or even average computers can do that people can't do, but there are lots of things that people's brains can do in an incredible way that computers just can't even touch. And the human brain can do it on so much less energy, whereas supercomputers using lots and lots of energy. I said recently in a conversation with a ministry partner that your brain can run on a bowl of pasta all day long and not even break a sweat. And so the brain is so incredible. So all of this quantum idea that relating to the brain, it also could corroborate a running theory that human consciousness requires some type of quantum methods. That's kind of a theory that's been floated for a while, that we still don't have a great definition for what causes human consciousness. And they think maybe something in the quantum realm could define that. Now, it seems to me that anytime you point to the quantum realm, you're just basically saying we don't know exactly what it is. Maybe it's that. But they don't really know. They're still studying. But it is an incredible thought to me to imagine that the brain is running on this whole different level. So there obviously needs to be way more research on this before we can say we even anywhere near understand it. But it's exciting to imagine that there could be breakthroughs that help in understanding a little bit more about how we were created, in addition to breakthroughs concerning the brain, which could have powerful advantages in the area of health and medicine. I mean, the more we understand about the brain, the better we'll be at healing it. So it's incredible to think of the complexity of the brain. And that's the point, I think, of today's episode, is the brain is so incredibly complex. But But why? I mean, why exactly is the brain so complex? I mean, there are animals with much lower level thinking. Now, their brains are still very complex, but nowhere near as capable as a human brain. So why did God make us so incredibly complex? Why did he create us this way? Well, I think there's a clue in this verse, which you've probably heard before. This is Psalms 139:14. Notice what the psalmist writes. He says, I will praise you because I have been remarkably and wondrously made. Your works are wondrous, and I know this very well. Now, there's some interesting points in this verse. It's interesting, first of all, that in the verse, our response to the complexity of creation should be praise. I mean, at least that was the response of the psalmist. He saw the complexity, he saw how remarkable even he himself as a creation was or is, and it caused him to praise the Creator. Now, there are a lot of people out there that are researching creation and they're refusing to praise the Creator, but I love the idea that that is the purpose, that when we study science, when we study even our own bodies, it should result in praise to God. But notice also this in the verse. In that last part of the verse, he says, I know this very well. One translation says, I know this full well. Now, how do you know things? Well, you know things because of your brain or your mind. We don't really understand the relationship between the mind and the brain, but something up here is happening. That's how you know things. And it is in that complex brain structure that you're able to know things. So it seems that the Creator wanted to make creatures that could know, that could understand, that could comprehend something about Him. I mean, can you imagine that if you could create some piece of art that could know something about you, how satisfying that would be? Well, it seems that in creating us at this level of complexity, one of the purposes was that God wanted us to be able to know Him. Our Creator wanted us to be able to have knowledge of Him. And He is a very complex idea. He is a very complex thought. And that requires a very complex brain. So for that, all of that to be the case, our thinker required a high level of complexity. So, remember today, you are remarkably and wondrously made. How about you let that drive you to praise your Maker? He wants you to know Him, and He created you with the most complex knowing mechanism in the universe so that you could do just that. How about you use that big, beautiful thought machine that's locked away in your skull cap for its purpose and get to know Him today. Thanks for watching. Be back with you soon.
More to the Story is a production of Free Grace International. If you like this show, consider leaving us a review on whatever platform you listen on, and be sure to share with your friends. For more great content, www.freegrace.in.